Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Me and my group will present about morphology. First, let me introduce my member. Number 1 is Larasati Alivia Putri Pamukas. Number 2 is Nafila Arifia Safinatu Najah. And the last is Catur Satria Akbar. Morphology. In many languages, what appears to be a single form actually turns out to contain a larger number of words, like element, for example, in Swahili, spoken throughout East Africa. The form Nitaku Penda convey what in English would have to be represented as something like I will love you. Now, is the Swahili form a single word? If it is a word, then it seems to consist of a number of elements which in English turn as separate word. A row correspondent can be presented in the following way. Nitaku Penda is the same as I will you love. It would seem that this Swahili word is rather different from that we think of an English word. Yet, there clearly is some similarity between the language. That was an example of investigating basic form in language commonly known as morphology.
Next is from slide 3 is morpheme. We can recognize that English word forms such as talks, talker, thought, and talking must consist of one element thought and a number of other elements such as er, ed, and ing. All these elements are described as morphemes. The definition of a morpheme is a minimal unit of meaning or grammatical function. Unit of grammatical function includes form used to indicate past tense or plural. For example, 1. The police reopened the investigation. The word reopened consists of three morphemes. A. One minimal unit of meaning is open. B. Another minimal unit of meaning is re-meaning again. C. A minimal unit of grammatical function is add, indicating past tense. 2. Third also contains three morphemes. A. One minimal unit of meaning tour. B. One minimal unit of meaning is marking person who does something. C. A minimal unit of grammatical function indicating plural.
Free morphemes, that is, morphemes that can stand by themselves, are single words. For example, open and tour. Bound morphemes, which are those forms that cannot normally stand alone and are typically attached to another form, exemplified as re, is, add, as. We can say that all affixes, prefixes, and suffixes in English are bound morphemes. The free morphemes can generally be identified as basic nouns, adjectives, verbs, etc. When they are used with bound morphemes attached, the basic verb forms are technically known as stems: undressed, un, prefix, bound, dress, stem, free, ed, suffix, bound, carelessness, care, stem, free, less, suffix, bound, ness, suffix, bound. In words such as if, reduce, and repeat, we can identify the bound morpheme re at the beginning. But the elements sieve, deuce, and pit are not separate verb forms and hence cannot be free morphemes. These types of forms are sometimes described as bound stems to keep them distinct from free stems such as dress and care.
What we have described as free morphemes fall into two categories. One, lexical morphemes, is a morphemes that ordinary nouns, adjective, and verb that we think of as the words that carry the content of the message we convey we can add new lexical morphs to the language rather easily, so they are treated as an open class of words. Example: girl, man, house, tiger, sad, long, yellow, sincere, open, look, follow, and breed. 2. Functional morphemes consist largely of the functional words in the language such as conjunction, preposition, article, and pronouns. We almost never add new functional morphemes to the language. They are described as a closed class of words. Example: and, but, when, because, on, near, above, in, the, that, it, and them. The set of affixes that makes up the categories of bound morphemes can also be divided into types. 1. Derivational morphemes. We use these bound morphemes to make new words or to make words of a different grammatical category from the stem. Example: A. The addition of the derivational morphemes ness change the adjective good to the noun goodness. B. A list of derivational morphemes will include suffixes such as the is in foolish, li in quickly, and the man in payment. C. Also include prefixes as re, pre, ex, miss, co, on, and many more. 2. Inflectional morphemes used to show if a word is plural or singular, if it is past tense or not, and if it is a comparative of or possessive from this form. These are not used to produce new words in the language, but rather to indicate aspects of the grammatical function of a word.
English has only 8 inflectional morphemes or inflections, illustrated in the following sentences. James' two sisters are really different. One likes to have fun and is always laughing. The other liked to read as a child and has always taken things seriously. One is the loudest person in the house and the other is quieter than a mouse. Note that as her is a possessive inflection and different from the s used as an abbreviation for is or has. She's singing, it's happened again. In the first sentences, both inflection s and s are attached to noun, one marking possessive and the other marking plural. They are for inflection attached to verb, third person singular, in present participle, at past tense, and past participle. There are two inflections attached to adjective, as comparative and as superlative.
Morphological description. The difference between derivational and inflectional morphemes is worth emphasizing. An inflectional morpheme never changes the grammatical category of a word. For example, both old and older are adjectives. The verb teach becomes the noun teacher if we add the derivational morpheme er from Old English er. So, the suffix er in modern English can be an inflectional morpheme as part of an adjective and also a distinct derivational morpheme as part of a noun. Whenever there is a derivational suffix and an inflectional suffix attached to the same word, they always appear in that order. First, the derivational er is attached to teach, then the inflectional s is added to produce teachers. Armed with all these terms for different types of morphemes, we can now take most sentences of English apart and list all the elements.
Problem in morphological description. The rather neat chart presented here conceals a number of outstanding problems in the analysis of English morphology. So far, we have only considered examples of English words in which the different morphemes are easily identifiable as separate elements. The inflection morpheme "s" is added to cat and we get the plural cats. What is the inflectional morphemes that make sheep the plural or sheep or man the plural of man? And if all is the derivatival suffix add to stem instruction to give us institutional, then can we take all of the word legal to get the stem leg? Unfortunately, the answer is no. There are other problem cases, especially in the analysis of different languages, but the solution to some of these problems are clearer in some instances than in others. For example, the relationship between law and legal is a reflection of the historical influence of different languages on English word form. The modern form law is a result of borrowing into Old English lagu from a Scandinavian source over 1000 years ago. The modern word legal was borrowed about 500 years later from the Latin form legalis of the law. Consequently, there is no derivational relationship between the noun law and the adjective legal in English, nor between the noun mouth from the Old English and the adjective oral, a Latin borrowing. An extremely larger number of English words owe their morphological patterning to language, like Latin and Greek. Consequently, a full description of English morphological will have to take account of both historical influence and the effect of borrowed elements.
Morphs and allomorphs. One way to treat differences in inflectional morphemes is by proposing variation in morphological realization rules. In order to do this, we draw an analogy with some processes already known in phonology. We can propose morphs as the actual forms used to realize morphemes. Example 1. Cats consists of two morphs, cats plus s, realizing a lexical morpheme and an inflectional morpheme plural. 2. Basis also consists of two morphs, bas plus es, realizing a lexical morpheme and an inflectional morpheme plural.
So, there are at least two different moves, s and es, actually is and is, used to realize the inflectional morpheme plural. Just as we note that there were allophones of a particular phoneme, so we can recognize the existence of allomorphs of a particular morpheme. That is, when we find a group of different morphs, all versions of one morpheme, we can use the prefix allo, one of a closely related set, and describe them as allomorphs of that morpheme. Example: it can be attached to a number of lexical morphemes to produce structures like cat plus plural, bus plus plural, ship plus plural, and man plus plural. In each of these examples, the actual form of the morphs that result from the morpheme plural are different, yet they are all allomorphs of the one morpheme. There are a number of other morphological processes at work in a language like English, such as those involved in the range of allomorphs for the morpheme past tense. These include the common pattern in walk plus past tense that produces walked, and also the special pattern that takes go plus past tense and produces the irregular past form went.
Other language. When we look at the morphology of the other language, we can also find other form and pattern. The first example below is from English and second from a language called Aztec from Central America. In both cases, we attach a derivational morphemes to a stem, then add an inflectional morphemes. Stem, dark, make, die. Derivationa, and, make, dia, goes to. Inflectional, add, pass, darkened. As, future, Mictias will kill. We can find out how different forms in language are used to morphological process and features.
Kanuri. Kanuri is the language spoken in Nigeria, a collection of examples of adjectives relegated from Kanuri. We can propose that the prefix noun is derivational morpheme that can be used to derive nouns from adjectives. Discovering a regular morphological feature of the type will enable us to make certain predictions when we encounter other forms in the language. For example, if the Kanuri word for lang is Namkurugu, then we can be reasonably sure that long is Kurugu. Genda. Different languages also employ different means to produce inflectional marking on forms. Here are some examples from Genda, a language spoken in Uganda. From this small sample, we can observe that there is an inflectional prefix only used with singular nouns, and a different inflectional prefix are used with the plural of those nouns. If you are told that Abelenzi is a Ganda plural meaning boys, you should be able to work out the singular from meaning boy.
Ilocano. When we look at Ilocano, a language of the Philippines, we find a quite different way of marking plurals. Singular, head, ulo, plural, ululo, heads. Singular, road, delan, plural, deldelan, roads. Singular, life, biak, plural, bibiak, lives. Singular, plant, mula, plural, mulmula, plants. In these examples, there seems to be repetition of the first part of the singular form. When the first part is be in the singular, the plural begins with this form repeat be. The process involved there is technically known as reduplication, repeating all or part of a form. There are many languages that use this repetition device as a means of inflectional marking. Having seen how plurals differ from singular forms in Ilocano, you should be able to take this plural form, tatalon, fields, and work out what the singular field would be. If you follow the observed pattern, you should get talon.
Tagalog. Here are some other intriguing examples from Tagalog, another language spoken in the Philippines. Basa, read. Bumasa, read. Babasa, will read. Tawag, call. Tumawag, call. Tatawag, will call. Sulat, write. Sumulat, write. Susulat, will write. If we assume that the first form in each column can be treated as a stem, then it appears that in the second item in each column, an element has been is inserted after the first consonant, or more precisely, after the syllable onset. In the third example, in each column note that the change in form involves in each case a repetition of the first syllable. So, the marking of future reference in Tagalog appears to be accomplished via reduplication. As we have been exploring all these different morphological processes, we have moved from the basic structure of word to a consideration of some topic traditional associated with grammar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Me and my group will present about morphology. First, let me introduce my member. Number 1 is Larasati Alivia Putri Pamukas. Number 2 is Nafila Arifia Safinatu Najah. And the last is Catur Satria.